We're back with Conservative Party leader Andrew Scheer, and I want to ask you about balancing the budget. You've been critical of the budget imbalances that the Liberals have taken on here. How would you balance the budget?
Well, first I should say that the Liberals are making it harder and harder for a Conservative government to come in and balance the budget. You'll recall during the previous election, the promise was to run very modest deficits. Just, I think, $10 billion was the cap that Trudeau put on his own deficits. Now we've seen that he's blown way past them. And more concerning is the lack of a plan to get back to balance. He's been asked specifically what is the goal? Is it, if it's not 2019, is it 2025? Is it 2030? The parliamentary budget officer indicates that if nothing changes, if we stay on the same track, it'll be 2055 before the budget is balanced. My 12-year-old will be 50 by the time that happens. So that's one of the things that motivates me. I can't let that happen to future generations of Canadians.
So what gets cut when you come in?
Well, there's a lot of new spending that the Liberals have announced that isn't even being spent in Canada. It's being spent around the world. It's not being spent on priorities that improve the quality of life of Canadians. So that's an area that I think a lot of Canadians, say, we're spending more and more money that we don't have, and it's not even going to benefit Canadians here. There's some anytime you get a Liberal government, there's always a lot of waste in how they do things, and that's the areas that I would focus on.
Are you looking at tax increases? Are you looking at cutting military spending? Can you get specific with me?
Absolutely not on the tax increase front. I think it's important to remember that the previous Conservative government took Canada through the very worst of the economic downturn, the worst economic downturn since the Second World War. We got back to balanced budgets without cutting essential services, without cutting transfers to the provinces, without cutting social safety net programs, and at the same time cutting taxes. It is possible, so that's the recipe that I'll follow. It won't be a new carbon tax. It won't be the new taxes that the Liberals have brought in, nickeling and diming people, taxes on beer and wine, excise taxes, taxes on Uber, lowering the threshold, the ceiling for TFSAs. They found a lot of ways to make it more expensive for Canadians, and we're still running massive deficits. So
do you see a corporate tax at 15% as appropriate?
I think that we need to make sure that our corporations in Canada are competitive versus the United States. Donald Trump is lowering the burden for businesses, making it more attractive to invest, not only on the tax side, but on the regulatory. Trying to, yeah.
But not succeeding just yet.
And on the regulatory side as well. We need to have an eye on that. And we have to make sure that, as Conservatives, we have to communicate this in a way that we're not seeking to lower corporate taxes because, we like to see black ink on the ledger book, or we like to look at profit and loss statements, or it's not for a bunch of guys in top hats and monocles that sit around the boardroom table. My dad's mutual fund is invested in Canadian corporations. Hundreds of thousands of people work for Canadian companies thanks to corporations deciding to set up in Canada. It's good for Canadians that businesses invest in Canada. It's good for workers. It's good for families. That's the message, is that when you lower corporate taxes, it doesn't benefit a small segment of the population. It benefits everybody. It benefits the Ontario Teachers Pension Fund, CPP. It's invested in Canadian companies.
Is that 15% target where you want it to be?
I think 15%. We lowered it to 15%. That's that is a good place for it to be. We should always be looking at ways to lower taxes, both on the personal side and on the corporate side.
Let's talk about the infrastructure bank, which, if I'm not mistaken, you have come out against. Yes. How do you suggest we fund these big mega projects going forward? What's the solution? Well,
the Liberals have turned the traditional public-private partnership model on its head, and not in a good way. The P3 model that the Conservative government brought in was an innovative tool to leverage private sector dollars to help fund some of these big ticket items, the types of infrastructure projects that really do place a huge burden on municipal taxpayers. But we did it in a way that allowed private sector companies to keep profits if they stuck to hard timelines and on hard caps on costs. What the Liberals have done is they flipped that around. They've guaranteed those same companies profits, but they've put all the risk on taxpayers, so that if there are cost overruns, the private sector company doesn't eat it. If the timelines are blown out of the water, the penalties aren't paid by the private investors. It's the taxpayer. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Risk and reward have to go together.